Good morning to you, Lisa. You're on the air.
Good morning, Mr. Daly. Thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to discuss Bill C-49,
Sure.
an act to amend the Atlantic Accord and the proposed wind energy projects across the province.
Okay, and this is all about offshore renewable energy projects, not the onshore projects, right?
Bill C-49 specifically is regarding the offshore proposed wind projects, but if I have an opportunity, I'd like to talk about the onshore wind projects as well.
Sure. What would you like to say about Bill C-49?
Well, first of all, it's in 1987, it marked the end of a very long period for Newfoundland and Labradorians in managing and maintaining ownership of their natural resources across the province. It was a 17-long fight, but here we are with Bill C-49, which is an act to amend that Atlantic Accord, which takes away or dilutes Newfoundland's ownership of its natural resources across the province. And I'm very surprised that media hasn't been talking much about this, or there hasn't been much publicity around the impacts of Bill C-49 to the province of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Well, I've certainly brought it up repeatedly. So where do your concerns lie with losing our natural resources or what have you? I'm sorry, can you expand on that?
Yeah, so with regard to this bill, first of all, I'd like to just focus on the bill itself. So the bill went forward, it was being fast-tracked in the House of Commons, and there's really a lack of consultation with critical stakeholders, such as, the Department of Fisheries, Forestry, Mining, Tourism, Hospitality, and so forth. And also the citizens of Newfoundland haven't been consulted about the changes to the Atlantic Accord, and most heavily impact, of course, are the fishers across the province. In addition to that, there's many sections, in particular regarding that's carried over from Bill C-69, which is part of the newly formed Impact Assessment Act, which is incorporated in the Bill C-49, which impacts the regional impact assessments that's being done to move forward with the wind energy projects across the province, which has been deemed and ruled as unconstitutional by the Supreme Court of Canada. It's those same frameworks that are now unconstitutional with over 30 elements that are being used to conduct the regional impact assessments. And so therefore they should be deemed as unconstitutional and invalid. In addition to that, when we look at the various impacts to the unilateral power that will be given to the federal government to move forward with development and exploration permits without even conducting environmental impacts, and that's specific to Section 56.1 of Bill C-49, which is again carried over in the Bill C-49. And then there's many other areas which, Section 8 of the bill, for example, it does not apply to offshore energy renewable resources, which jeopardize Newfoundland and Labrador's principal beneficiary status as, maintaining ownership, management, and development of our natural resources in the province. And there's many other aspects as well with the bill, which doesn't kind of coincide with the original intent of the Atlantic Accord, which really focuses on all of the natural resources, whereas Bill C-49, which Minister Wilkinson stated 3 times in one of the Standing Committee review meetings, that the purpose for the bill and the only reason for the bill is to build offshore wind farms.
Yeah, it's about creating the regulatory regime. So what leads you to think that there won't be the appropriate levels of environmental assessment before anything's given an actual green light?
Well, if we look at the incorporation of Bill C-69, which contains the 30 unconstitutional elements, that same framework is being used to conduct a regional impact assessment across the province. So therefore, there's unconstitutional elements in that which will be carried forward. And that does impact, like I said, 56.1, which talks about being able to move forward without even doing environmental impact, which would have, marine and other environmental and ecological impacts to the province.
And Bill C-69 was, of course, ruled on by the Supreme Court as government overreach, right? It was basically to replace the National Energy Board with the Canadian Energy Regulator Act. And the big concern many players had, especially those in the oil business, was timelines for assessments, from 900 days. And then there was a compression down to, I can't remember what the last number was that they were using inside of 69. So I understand when federal government overreach has been ruled on, and that's several times in the recent past in the Supreme Court. I think back to the plastics issue being labeled as toxic when waste management is a provincial jurisdiction. So they've had some trouble with some of these big sweeping policies. And I have followed along the conversation with C-49, and it has massive implications. As a matter of fact, the province, not only here but in Nova Scotia, they're demanding a fast track. The thought is that we'll lose out on economic opportunities if and when this bill isn't brought through Parliament and given Senate approval finally as well. So I understand your concerns. I suppose there's a follow-up conversation to be had with both levels of government for the appropriate ministers responsible. Happy to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, yes, I'm all for green energy and renewable energy, but the province of Newfoundland, in Labrador in particular, is already green. We already lead the country, or the world really, not just the country, but the world in having over 90% of renewable energy. So I don't think as a resident of Newfoundland and a citizen of Canada that we need to have more wind energy projects. And in fact, if you look at what happened during really cold periods in Alberta in December, when they tried to utilize the energy from wind farms in Alberta, it failed, and they had to go to Saskatchewan and Ontario to use hydroelectricity to manage the overload of the demands on the energy grid. So, this bill C-49 is also being put forth as a green energy bill and something that we need in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. But I don't think that we need it. And any environmental or industrialization of projects across the province shouldn't be at the expense of our environmental or other natural resource industries, such as the fisheries, such as the mining, such as tourism. And we already see those impacts happening. And I've heard several of your listeners calling in regarding the New Bay Pond issue where, I think it was 60 land lots that were sold. And I spoke to one lady a few days ago, and she's invested over $60,000. She's already built her cabin, which is supposed to be a retirement home. And now the land value has gone down. People want their money back. They don't want to be living around a lake that's going to be surrounded by 400 or 500 wind turbines. And we see the impacts happening daily. So, I'm all for green energy. I'm all for lowering carbon emissions, all for increasing the economic impacts in Newfoundland as well, specifically, but not at the expense of people, not at the expense of our natural resources or industries.
I think the Alberta analogy is maybe not necessarily 100% on point, because that was part of their integrated grid system. They were relying on it to power the province in part, when in fact offshore proposals here, we probably don't need they're going to have to be at a certain scale to make them economically viable, period, and we don't need the power as much as these will generate. So there's the biggest question for me is, it's proximity to market. If we're not the market, how does it even make a whole lot of sense for offshore wind to find a market for its power? And where is it? Northeastern United States? Ontario? Quebec? Look, I don't know. So I think there's still some massive confusion about who's going to be consuming that power, where the power purchase agreements lie, because it won't be us. I know Newfoundland Labrador Hydro is talking about the additional requirement of power. People lean on the 150 megawatt generator, diesel generator at Holyrood, but that's, would be a small fraction of power that would be coming from any offshore farm. So that's my number one question, is not only consultation with people like inside the fishery, for instance, which I think is a really important point, but who's going to buy that power? How are they going to get it there? I know you can build cables all you like, but is that actually a proximity issue that comes with a consequential business model? I don't know. Apparently there's people kicking the tires all the time. It'd be nice to know who they are, where their plans lie for end consumer. And I'm happy to chase this around because it is a big one, Lisa, and I'm glad you brought it forward on the show this morning.
Yes, and one other thing I want to make in regards to the Bill C-49, it is instilling fear and uncertainty in the petroleum sector. And last year, we saw an absence of lease bids for offshore development in 2023, which the petroleum industry provides 25% of Newfoundland's economic revenue for the province of Newfoundland. And now, because last year there were zero bids in 2023, what impact will that have in the coming year for Bill C-49? So there's a lot of unanswered questions here. There's a lot of people that should have been involved and consultations and engagement made much earlier than moving forward and tabling this bill, which is clearly just for the development of offshore wind energy farms.
I appreciate the time, Lisa. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Good call there. Lots of good content inside that.